Good evening, everyone. I'm really delighted to have this opportunity to be with you this evening for lots of different reasons. I mean, not only are we going to talk about our approach to our own Dharma practice and so forth, we're also going to be accumulating some extra merit today, because today is the celebration or the observance of let's see if I can find the picture. Here we go. Labab Duchen, the Buddha's descent from heaven. There are two calendar systems in the Tibetan astrological tradition. One is created by the Karmapas, and it's called the Serpu tradition. And then the other is called the Pukluk, and it's used by the Tibetan government in exile and other official channels. And so we're off by 1 month now. The Surluk calendar has Labab Duchen, the Buddha's descent from the God realm, as happening today, and the other system has it happening next month. So you can look at it in a positive way and think, oh, well, now I have 2 days that I can earn extra merit, because it's said that these 4 Buddhist holy days are sacred, and as such, they have, I guess you could call it the feng shui of time, and that it's an auspicious time, and everything you do today has extra importance and extra power. The story goes that the Buddha wanted to repay the kindness of his mother, who passed away 7 days after he was born. So he went to join her in the realm of the 33 gods. And while there, he gave her a teaching that resulted in the text we now know as the Abhidharma. I was told by one of my teachers that the reason the Buddha went to the God realm to teach Abhidharma was because the gods were thought to have great patience, and he needed about 3 months to give this teaching. And he said that he thought that they would be able to sit the longest. So whatever the reason is, he repaid his mother's kindness by giving these teachings on cosmology and the mystic practices. So I thought I would talk to you just a little bit about how special and important this day is, when the Buddha said to his hosts in the God realm, thank you for asking me to stay permanently, but I have work to do back on Earth, so I'm going to go now. And so he returned to the human realm and continued to teach us. So and that's why we have the stairway behind him. So I just thought I would start by wishing you a happy Labab Duchen, and make the aspiration that our work today is of great benefit to you and your practice and all beings. So now that we've welcomed you, I'm going to ask Yunten to please share the prayers that we're going to be doing to begin our session today. And we always begin our sessions with prayer, because it helps us with our motivation and to make sure that our motivation is coming from the very best place. I'll do my best to lead these prayers for you. O doje chan chen te lo narodang marpa mi la chu je kam pa du sum she ja kun kien karma pa che ji chun je ju pa zin dang Drita sa sum pa den tru pa sok Sablam cha dia che lang hanye pe nyame tro kunda po kajula so adep so kajula manam Jupatin no nam tar chin jilo shen lo kom ki ka par sung pa jin zenor kun la cha shen he padang se dir du ta chu pe kong chen la ne kurjem pa me par chin ji lo mugu kom ki go war song pa jin Meng a ter go je pe la ma la Jundu so wa de pe kong chen la Chu mi mu gu ke war chin ji lo Yang me kong ki ngo shi sung pa shin gan shar to pe ngo wo so ma de ma chu de ka job pe kong chen la Gom cha lo dan dra war chin ji lo nam to ngo wo chu kur sung pa jin chi yam ha yin chi yang char wa la Magaro parchar we kong chen la Corde her me to parchin ji lo Kewa kun tu yang da la ma dang Dra me chu ki pa la long chu ching sa da lam ki yen ten rap so ne dor je chang gi go pan your to show dor je chang gi go pan your to show. Okay, now we'll recite refuge and bodhicitta prayers, aiming our practice toward awakening and our intention toward the benefit and liberation of all beings. O Sanje Chudang Soji Chonam La Chang Chu Pardu Dani Kyap Suji Da ji jin so ji bei sun nam ki dro la pen shir sanjay drupar sho sanjay chudang so ji cho nam la Chang chu pardu dhani kyap su chi Da ji jin so ji bei sun nam ki dro la pin shir sanjay drupar sho sanjay chudang so ji cho nam la Chang chu pardu dhani kyap su chi Da ji jin so ji bei sun nam ki Drola Pinshir Sanjay Druparsho. Now a statement of the four immeasurables, making the aspiration that all beings are free from suffering and come to happiness. O Semchen Tamche Tewa Tan Tewe Gyutan Tempar Gyuchik Dungao Tan Dungao Gi Jutan Trawar Churchik Dungam Hepe Tewa Tampa Tam Hindrawar Churchik Nerin Chandan Yitan Drawe Tonyan Chempola Nepar Jurchik Semchen Tamche Tewa Tan Tewe Gyutan Tempar Gyurchik Dunga Tan Dunga Gi Jutan Drawar Churchik Dunga Mepe Tewa Tampa Tam Hindrawar Churchik Nerin Chantan Yedan Drawe Tonyan Chempola Nepar Jurchik Semchen Tamche Tewa Tan Tewe Gyutan Tempar Gyurchik Dungal Tan Dungal Gi Jutan Trawar Churchik Dungal Mepe Tewa Tampa Tam Min Trawar Churchik Nerin Chantan Yedan Drawe Tonyan Chempola Nepar Jurchik. Oh, now to accumulate merit and make the aspiration for goodness for all. Oh, chasawadan chuchin shapadang jesu yirang kershin sohai kewa chunze dagi chisapa tamche dagi chanchu chingo. All right. Thank you, everyone. Now, before we begin, I'll say a short prayer of my own, and then we'll be ready to start. Oh, Palden Sawe Lama Rinpoche, Dagi Chiwar Pede Ten Shala, Kadrin Jembo Kone Je Sunte. Kusum tugging a drip sal to soul. Okay, thank you, everyone. Let's see. I'm doing a little bit of mathematics here. Okay, yeah. This next this last month that we had, which was the month of September, was an anniversary of sorts for me, because it's the it was the 47th anniversary of meeting Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche. He came to Columbus, Ohio in September of 1977 for his very first teaching in our state and city. He had come to the United States just a year before at the request of His Holiness the 16th Jawan Karmapa to start teaching Dharma to Dharma students in the United States who had asked His Holiness, please send us a monk. And so he sent Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche. And then next month is another anniversary for me, and that will be the 47th anniversary of my taking refuge with Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche in November of 1977. It's a funny story how I came to take refuge. I wanted to do it when he was there the first time, when he was there in September. But the organizers said to me, well, you know, refuge is a very big step. You might need to think about it a little bit. And I was just out of college, still kind of young and nervous about life. And I said, oh, big step. Well, maybe I should wait. And then after Rinpoche left and I realized I had missed my opportunity to take refuge and start Buddhist practice, I was a little bit cross with myself for having let someone else talk me out of it. But everything came out fine because Rinpoche came back in November, just a few months later, and gave the refuge vow again. And at that time, I was able to take refuge. And when we finished the ceremony, Khenpo Rinpoche said, now that you've taken refuge, you should look at this day, November 6th, 1977, as a special day in your life. And you should, on that day, make sure you make extra offerings on your shrine. He says, it's sort of like your birthday. So ever since then, I've been marking that special day with offerings and so forth. And I want to just say, I hope that for you, you have some special days in your life, the day you met the Dharma, the day that you made the decision to start meditating, and so on. I hope that you commemorate and remember the special days in your life as well. So enough of personal things. Let's talk a little bit about our topic. This topic was actually one that I suggested. And the reason I suggested it is because 47 years ago, when Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche began teaching us, you have to imagine that he was starting with, I guess you could say, no information. He may have met some Westerners before, but I don't think he really knew much about us. And although he told us later that when he was a boy, he had dreamed about a big city with tall buildings where men and women both wore trousers. So obviously, when he was a boy, he had a future vision of his life in New York City. In any case, he was learning about us as we were learning about him. And so he started us with the basics. He started us with understanding that the Buddhist teaching, although vast and broad, did not have to be bewildering and confusing. That if we used a few principles as a framework to understand the Buddhist teaching, it would be easier for us to hear and receive the teachings of the Buddha. So by using a very simple framework, the framework of the three yanas, or the three vehicles, he was able to take the breadth and depth of the Dharma that he knew and package it into a small package that we could understand. At the same time, he did something else that was really kind of brilliant. He taught us how to meditate. I know that may sound a little bit foolish, but this was a big deal. He told us later, he said, when I first came here and started teaching Westerners, he said, I didn't think right away that they would have much background in Buddhism, so it might not be easy for them to feel faith and devotion to the teachings of the Buddha, he said. But he said, I figured that if I could teach them how to meditate, that when they meditated, he said, even for the first time, he said they would have a feeling of groundedness and a feeling of relaxation and openness in their mind. And he said that feeling would give them faith in the Dharma. So he did two very brilliant things. He created a very simple framework by using the three yanas as his guide, and he taught us to meditate so that our minds were more relaxed and open and ready to listen to the teachings. So I thought I would start with that and tell you that I felt his teaching program was incredibly brilliant, and we are still using it today at the Karma Take-Some Choling Center in Columbus, Ohio. When people come through our door the first time, we take them into a classroom, and we talk about the name of our center. We say our center was named by the 16th Jawang Karmapa, and we were named Karma Teksum Choling. Karma, Teksum Choling, is actually the Tibetan name for the center that we know as Karma, Triyana, Dharmachakra. It's the same name. Karma, Triyana, Dharmachakra is the name of the monastery in Woodstock, New York, the beautiful picture behind me. And Karma, Triyana, Dharmachakra is the name in Sanskrit. Karma Teksum Choling is the name in Tibetan. It's exactly the same name. So either way, whether you're talking about Sanskrit or you're talking about Tibetan, the meaning is the same. Karma is our family name. Our family name comes first. We are of the family of Karmapa. Karmapa, who is the head of our tradition, was prophesied by the Buddha. The Buddha in one of his teachings spoke of a karma ka. That's how it was spoken of in Sanskrit, a person of Buddha activity, a great Buddha activity that would come in the centuries after the Buddha. And when the first Karmapa, Dusam Khyentse, was active in Tibet and teaching, a pundit or scholar from India came to visit Tibet, and he was amazed at the intelligence and the depth of the teachings given by Dusam Khyentse, and also his Dharma activity in creating communities and monasteries and so forth. And he said, this person must be the Karma Ka that was prophesied by the Buddha. And so the name stuck, and he became known in Tibetan as the Karma Pa, the person of Dharma activity. But the lineage is also named Karma, Karma Kagyu. Ka in the word Kagyu means word. It's a word that means word. It's the first letter of the Tibetan alphabet. But it also carries the connotation of command, like the command of a monarch, a king or a queen. And in this case, the monarch is the Buddha Shakyamuni. It is the lineage, because the word Ju means lineage. So the lineage of the words of the Buddha. But it goes even farther than that. Because if you remember from hearing the history of the Kagyu lineage, you'll remember that when Tilopa, the Indian saint, gained his enlightenment, he had a vision of the Buddhas, Shakyamuni, appearing in the form of a blue Buddha, holding a vajra and bell, symbolizing wisdom and skillful means. And this blue Buddha, Vajradhara or Vajra holder, spoke to him the essential words of instruction in the meditation we now call Mahamudra. So these spoken teachings, these whispered teachings from Vajradhara to Tilopa are still being taught today in an unbroken line by the Karmapa and his spiritual children. So we are the lineage of Karmapa and also the lineage, the Karma Kagyu, that is the lineage of the spoken word of Mahamudra. But the next word is Teksum or Triyana, and it means the three yanas or the three paths spoken of by the Buddha in his teachings. We're going to hear more about that in a few minutes when we start talking about the sutras. And so Triyana refers to the three paths taught by the Buddha during his lifetime. The Buddha taught for more than 40 years, and his teachings were later systematized by scholars into these three categories. The path of individual liberation, sometimes called the Hinayana, the path of liberation for all, or the greater vehicle, Mahayana, and the indestructible vehicle, the Vajrayana. So these three yanas were taught by the Buddha. And they are also practiced by our lineage. Many of you are familiar with the work done by the Canadian translator Yeshe Jamso. He said to me one time, he said, instead of calling it Tibetan Buddhism or Vajrayana Buddhism, we probably should call it Triyana Buddhism. And he said the reason for this is because when you come into a Karma Kagyu center, you learn all three practices. Your individual liberation practice, or your Hinayana practice, is quiet sitting meditation, as well as ethics and morality taught through precepts. Also, in the Mahayana, or the great vehicle, or the vehicle for the liberation of all, our practice of that is compassion meditation, sometimes called Tonglen, or sending and receiving. But that's not all. We also have a Vajrayana meditation that we are taught. And that's the mantra meditation of the Bodhisattva Chenrezig. The mantra Om Mani Padme Hum was popularized in the United States by some of the first Kagyu teachers to come here, including His Eminence, the very venerable Kalu Rinpoche, the previous Kalu Rinpoche, and His Holiness Karmapa, and others. So these three practices, quiet sitting, along with ethics and morality, Tonglen, or compassion meditation, and mantra meditation, such as the Om Mani Padme Hum compassion mantra of Chenrezig, they form the basis of practice at our centers, our Karma Take-Some Choling centers in particular. And so I can understand why Yeshe Jamso said it would be appropriate to call Vajrayana Buddhism Triyana Buddhism, because all three methods are taught. But we'll get into that in a few minutes. The last part of the name, Karma Take-Some Choling, or Karma, Triyana, Dharmachakra, whether the word is Dharmachakra in Sanskrit or Chu Ling in Tibetan, it means place of the Dharma. Chu means Dharma and Ling means place. Dharma, chakra. Dharma is the teaching and chakra is the wheel or the place. So the Karma Triyana Dharmachakra Monastery and the Karma Take-Some Choling centers, therefore, are a place of the Buddhist teaching, of the three vehicles, of the Karma Kagyu tradition. And explaining this to our new people, it helps for us at this point to say, and now you know why we use initials instead of the long names. KTD is a lot easier, or KTC is a lot easier than saying place of the Buddhist teachings, of the three vehicles, of the Karma Kagyu tradition. So this is how we first learned about the practices of our lineage, is through just understanding our name. And then as Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche continued to teach us, he began to explain the two approaches, the approach of the sutras and the approach of the tantras. And so that's where we're going to go next in our little presentation. Now, because I'm getting a little older, I don't know if you've noticed the gray hair, but because I'm getting a little older, I have to use outlines now, and it really helps me a lot. So I made an outline for tonight, and I will clean it up a little bit and make it available to you afterward. But for tonight, let me see if I can find the outline. We're going to talk a little bit. Yeah, here we go. Let's see if I can make it happen here. Can I make it happen? Nope, wrong one. There we go. Yay! First of all, I have to tell you, I have a disclaimer. I'm not a scholar. So I can't pretend that I know a lot about the topic of Sutrayana and Tantrayana. So I would call myself an amateur Dharma student who has read a lot of books by great scholars such as Khenchen Trungpa Rinpoche and Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche. And I mainly want to approach the topic the way Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche approached it with us, emphasizing the practical aspects of meditation in the two systems. Because I think that this is important because if we start to learn all of the names and we begin to read about all the parts of the Tantrayana, all the parts of the Sutrayana, the four levels of Tantra, the oh my gosh, the views and systems of the Hinayana, the views and systems of the Mahayana. I don't know about you, but it made my head hurt. Okay, it made my head hurt. So this is probably why I didn't become a scholar. But the meditation and the approach that Rinpoche taught us in meditation and behavior, now those topics I could relate to. The Sutrayana approach, he said, was an approach based on understanding karma, action, cause, and result, understanding that it is good to practice virtue, and it is good to avoid non-virtue, and so that it is important to learn the 10 virtuous actions and try to do those as much as possible, and learn the 10 non-virtuous actions and try to avoid those as much as possible. And so that was important information that helped me a lot. Then he taught us the basic sitting meditation practice. In sitting meditation, we allow our attention to rest on a single object. We first learned about it through breath awareness meditation. As we settled on into a meditative posture and allowed our attention to rest upon the breath, he said that we should stay with the breath as it went out and stay with the breath as it went in. And then if we could count 1 in breath, out breath 1, in breath, out breath 2, and so on. And then he said, if our attention wandered, we were supposed to notice the wandering. We could even label it thinking, let it go, and then return our attention to the breath and think of it as a fresh start. And that this is what he taught us at the very beginning, just this very, very simple form of shamatha meditation or tranquility meditation. And what we noticed, what I noticed personally, was that after practicing shamatha for a while, the 10 virtuous actions and the 10 non-virtuous actions became clearer to me. I began to see when my mind was becoming virtuous and when my mind was becoming non-virtuous. In fact, I could notice individual thoughts. And I realized that now I was beginning to get the power to change my thoughts by letting go of harmful thoughts and embracing positive things. And in that way, I tried my best to let go of negative actions and adopt positive ones, which really is the essence of the Hinayana, or the individual liberation vehicle. Knowing what virtue is, we practice virtue. Knowing what non-virtue is, we avoid it, and we tame our minds. That was the teaching the Buddha gave. Everybody knows about the Eightfold Noble Path, but his simplified method of remembering it, do no harm, practice virtue, tame your mind. This is the practice of the Buddha. This is, for me, was the heart of the Hinayana discipline. But it didn't stop there. His practices and teachings didn't stop there, because he gradually introduced to us the concept of the Mahayana, or the larger vehicle, the vehicle for the liberation of all. He introduced us to the idea of bodhicitta. Bodhi means awakening, and citta means mind. The mind that wants to awaken, and also the attitude of the bodhisattva. Bodhi is awakening, sattva is a person who holds the mind of awakening. The bodhisattva commitment, which is the bodhisattva vow, he explained as the wish to liberate not just ourselves, which is which you could say is the goal of the Hinayana, liberating ourselves from the sufferings of samsara by letting go of non-virtue and embracing virtue, and practicing meditation so the mind is at peace. And by doing that, that brings us some individual relief from the pain and suffering of this world of cyclic existence that the Buddha called an ocean of suffering, or samsara. So by practicing the Hinayana, we got some distance, we got some freedom from non-virtue and some peace in our mind, so that we could begin to change our thoughts and actions. And then in the Mahayana, Khenpo Rinpoche gave us the bodhisattva intention and taught us about love, compassion, joy, and equanimity, which we call the four immeasurables. And he also taught us about lojong, or mind training, in which we train the mind to be loving and compassionate through the meditation practice known as tonglen, or sending and receiving. So these two practices, the Hinayana practice of quiet sitting meditation coupled with ethics and morality, formed the basis, and then provided us with a foundation from which we could then learn the Mahayana about love, compassion, joy, and equanimity, as well as understanding the bodhisattva commitment to benefit all sentient beings. We also were introduced to a very simplified idea about the Mahayana teachings on wisdom and emptiness. And because in the Hinayana, we came to understand impermanence and interdependence. In the Hinayana, we understood that everything that happens, happiness and suffering, they're all impermanent. And we also came to understand that all phenomena is interdependent. It doesn't, nothing exists of itself and by itself. It exists in connection with other things. So by understanding impermanence and interdependence, we didn't have to worry about whether we understood emptiness or not, because Rinpoche only spoke in terms of interdependence and impermanence. But when he began to teach us the Mahayana, he began to talk about emptiness, the idea that things are not established, that things are actually, they exist, but not in the way we think they exist. And he began to introduce these ideas of emptiness to us. He even gave a teaching on the Heart Sutra, although I have to confess, I'm still not sure I completely understand it. But this was not all that Rinpoche taught us. He actually also taught us the Vajrayana. And rather than making us wait until we had fully grasped and conquered the Hinayana and fully grasped and practiced the Mahayana, he taught us right away, like right after we took refuge. He taught us the meditation and mantra of the Bodhisattva Chenrezig, because he said that the 16th Karmapa recommended that he teach it. He said, oh, compassion, good for America. So he obviously knew something about Americans that maybe we didn't know about ourselves. And so by learning the visualization of Chenrezig, the Bodhisattva of compassion, and learning the mantra Om Mani Padme Hum and learning the meditation of it, we learned very easily about the Vajrayana, the transformation of ordinary understanding to sacred understanding. And in that way, we began to understand the principles of the Vajrayana, the indestructible vehicle. So let me see if I can return now. Oh, by the way, and he also later, after teaching us Chenrezig, he began to teach us Mahamudra, that great, wonderful teaching that Tilopa imparted to Naropa, that Vajradhara imparted to Tilopa, and Tilopa to Naropa, and all of the masters to our present day. He taught us about Mahamudra through the practice known as the preliminaries or Nundro. He had us take refuge by doing prostrations while reciting the refuge prayer. He had us practice purification by doing the Vajrasattva mantra. He had us practice offerings by making mandala offerings. He had us practice Guru Yoga. And then after that, he gave us a mantra practice that he said had been recommended to him by the 16th Karmapa, the practice of the Guru Sadhana of the second Karmapa, Karmapakshi. So those of you who might wonder why it is that KTD does the Karmapakshi practice every month at the monastery, and places like Columbus KTC do the Karmapakshi practice once a month at the Dharma Center, it's because the 16th Karmapa said that after a person finished their Nundro, their Mahamudra preliminaries, that they should do a recitation and meditation upon the Guru Sadhana of the second Karmapa, which has a special connection to the practice of Mahamudra. But that's a tale for another day. But these were the methods he taught us and how we learned about them. So let's see. I've started by telling you what the three yanas are, but now I'm going to talk a little bit about the approach of the Sutrayana system as opposed to the Tantrayana system. Let's see if I can get those notes in front of me again. Okay, there we go. And as you know from the earlier part of my talk, this is important. Why is it important? It's important to know about the three yanas because Tibetan Buddhism could be called three-yana Buddhism, as it encourages students to study and apply all three methods for awakening, the Hinayana, the Mahayana, and the Vajrayana. In this way, by practicing all three at once, they help each other and they advance us along the path. The Hinayana practices calm our mind and calm our behavior. The Mahayana practices give us the Bodhisattva motivation, and the Vajrayana practices help us to transform our idea of ourselves from mundane to sacred. Well, why is this necessary? We've got a situation, and that is that we are human beings in samsara, but we also have the means to accomplish freedom from samsara in the fact that we have Buddha nature. We have Buddha nature covered by obstacles and obscurations. In his teaching on the lamp of Mahamudra, which, by the way, if you have never seen this teaching, I've forgotten, I think you can buy copies of it at the KTD bookstore. It's a wonderful teaching on the Lamp of Mahamudra book. I think it's Sele Nak Sok Rondro, but I'll have to go back and look that up. But in any case, Khenpo Rinpoche said that we have had Buddha nature since beginningless time, but we've not recognized our Buddha nature due to ignorance. And during the teaching one of the people in the audience came to the question microphone and asked this question. Well, if we have Buddha nature, why aren't we Buddhas right now? Why aren't we already Buddhas? And Rinpoche was very patient, and he explained, well, our minds are limitless. Our minds are limitless. And as such, our minds contain all potential, including the potential to not know its own nature. Otherwise, your mind wouldn't truly be limitless. I had to think about that one for a minute, but I could see the logic. And he said this mere sheen of ignorance. I just love that phrase in English. Like the shiny oil on top of a puddle, you know, the shining, shimmering oil that sometimes floats on top of a puddle. This mere sheen of ignorance, he said, has covered our mind from beginningless time, and it needs to be dispelled for us to see and recognize our Buddha nature. And he said this was the function of all of the practices of the Buddha, was to dispel this mere sheen of ignorance so that our Buddha nature can shine forth. Back in 1982, I'm going to say, I believe that was when it was, previous Keller Rinpoche gave the Dharmachakra empowerment in New York City at Columbia University at Asia House. It was an amazing thing. There were dozens and dozens and dozens of people there receiving the multi-day empowerment of Dharmachakra. And after that, Keller Rinpoche traveled to KTD Monastery, and a lot of us followed him. And we wanted to get teachings on Dharmachakra, this great system of mantra practice. And you know how Keller Rinpoche started his teaching? He started by talking about our current situation. He said, you know, we have a mind, and this mind is amazing, and it can know itself, and it can know itself completely, and this mind can become Buddha. But we have a problem. He said, and that is that we don't know the nature of our minds. And he said, our mind can be experienced in one of two modes. He said, it's either, your mind is either in wisdom mode, where your mind is resting in the recognition of its own nature, or if it's not able to do that, it's in confusion mode, where the mind does not recognize its own nature and instead posits or believes in a self and an external world of others. And so it's like a switch. It's either on or it's off. And so if we're not able to rest our mind in its own nature, then we're in confusion mode. And all of the experiences of samsara proceed from that. Whereas if our mind goes into wisdom mode, where it sees its own nature, then everything that we experience is experienced from the point of view of wisdom. So in a way, you could say it's all a big misunderstanding. It's all a big misunderstanding. In his book, Creation and Completion, Kenshin Trungpa Rinpoche explains that the nature of mind is empty luminosity. In other words, the mind is not a material thing. It's not made of atoms or molecules. And yet, even though it's not a material thing, that's its emptiness, you see, it's not nothing, because it can know and it can experience. And so when we experience this mind as empty luminosity, and when we fail to experience, I think I see, and that when we fail to experience these, see, I gotta correct my own writing. When we fail to experience these aspects of mind, oh no, I see, no. When we experience these aspects of mind, we make a basic mistake. We mistake emptiness as a self and luminosity as an external world of others. So we experience our mind, but we make a mistake about what it is. Does that make sense? I'll read you a little bit from Creation and Completion. It's from the introduction by Lama Sarah Harding, but it's really a very useful paragraph. Those of you who have the English language edition, let's see if I can get it close enough for it to show up. Nope. It's on page 8 of the introduction. Sarah Harding writes, due to the complex process involved in engendering and maintaining a sense of a substantial me or I or self, and a substantial world around us, we have lost touch with our basic nature. It is often explained that the actual emptiness nature of mind is misconstrued as a self, while the clear or radiant aspect of the mind is projected outward as a separate external world of others. And then she says, as confusion proliferates, the concepts of duality, feelings of attachment and aversion, and consequent karmic actions and imprints become self-perpetuating. This is why it is called cyclic existence. And this is why it is characterized by the experience of suffering. But the essential emptiness and clarity of mind has never for a moment been absent. And then she says, in contemplative practice, we can watch the process in our minds unfold moment by moment and recognize how with our thoughts we create our world. And when that happens, we gain the potential to create our environment and our world in a conscious way. And so this leads to the practices of love, compassion, and also the practices of mantra. But let's go back to what Kala Rinpoche said. Remember, I said he was going to give this very complicated teaching on Kala Chakra, but he started with the 4 veils. He said, first, we start with basic ignorance. We don't recognize the nature of our mind as Buddha. Not recognizing our mind as Buddha. Instead, through our habitual tendencies from many, many lifetimes, we have a self-concept, which then automatically divides the world in 2. Bokhar Rinpoche called it very simply, me and not me. Self and other. And of course, with self and other, drama ensues, and that brings up our mental afflictions of jealousy and hatred and all the rest. That leads us to accomplish a lot of karma, which hardens and worsens the situation. So after Kala Rinpoche presented this, I was really feeling a little bit hopeless. I was saying, wow, it looks like samsara is self-perpetuating. There's no way out. Is there no way out? But because the Buddha taught 84,000 dharmas to purify and remove the 84,000 mental afflictions. Now, of course, we know that it's not literally 84,000. It's just a lot. But it's not hopeless because the Buddha taught us how to be free. And that freedom, that enlightenment is not passive. It's dynamic and it's active. Kala Rinpoche said the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are like, he used the example of a radio tower on the hill. And he said they're broadcasting love, compassion, and wisdom 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. They're always there, always exuding love, compassion, and wisdom. And then he said, if through prayer and contemplation and visualization, we tune our being, like tuning a radio. If we tune ourselves to their beings, we will receive their blessings. If we tune our sets to their blessings, we'll receive them, and our obstacles and obscurations will be dispelled. This was one of the most beautiful descriptions of prayer I had ever heard. Now, let's go back and see what Khenpo Rinpoche said about all of this. He said, yes, we have a problem in samsara. We have a lot of obstacles and obscurations. But he said, whoops, he said, it's not your fault. It's not your fault that you're in samsara. He said, you just haven't been taught the methods for freedom. He says, it's not your fault. You can fix this, which really made me feel better. And then these methods can be divided into the methods of Sutrayana and Tantrayana. And if those of you who remember, there's a prayer that says, teach the Dharma that suits the different aptitudes and dispositions of sentient beings. We all have different dispositions and aptitude. And these texts, these teachings given by the Buddha can help us do that. The sutras were given by the Buddha during his lifetime. The sutras or the discourses of the Buddha are part of what are called the three baskets or Tripitaka. The sutras, the Vinaya, which is monastic discipline, and that Abhidharma. Remember, we talked about the Abhidharma because that's what the Buddha went to the realm of the 33 gods to teach his mother. So these are the sutras. And what is taught in the sutras are the Hinayana and the Mahayana views, meditation, and action. And what are the tantras? The word tantra means thread or connection. And it describes the method of using mindfulness to connect our attention to the idea and then hopefully eventually the experience of an awakened state. So in the Sutrayana, we're taught in the Sutrayana and the Hinayana and the Mahayana, we gradually remove the obstacles and obscurations that we have by our meditation practice to uncover our Buddha nature that's within us. Khenpo Rinpoche used the term in the Sutrayana, which is the Hinayana and the Mahayana, we're considered to be raw materials that are gradually purified by Buddhist practice. The Hinayana emphasizes virtuous behavior, as well as interdependence and impermanence. And the Mahayana emphasizes your attitude and your motivation, as well as wisdom and emptiness. Those of you who have taken the Bodhisattva vow know that once you've taken the Bodhisattva vow, that it is possible that you might have to do something wrong in order to benefit beings. And the teachings say you shouldn't be afraid to do that. Whereas in the Hinayana, it's all about your behavior. Did you do this or did you not do this? But in the Mahayana, it is why did you do it? And what is your motivation? The purest motivation is the motivation to benefit beings. The least pure motivation is to benefit only yourself. The example of this wrongdoing in the service of the Mahayana motivation is telling a lie in order to, someone is being wrongly accused of a crime and they're being chased by soldiers or guards, and you mislead the guards with a lie. You say, oh, he went that way, when he actually went that way. So from the Hinayana point of view, you've committed a fault. But from the Mahayana viewpoint, your motivation was more important than the action that you did. It's a little bit more subtle of a point. But in these Sutrayana systems, the process of awakening takes many eons. Those of you who remember the 5 paths, the path of accumulation, the path of juncture, the path of seeing, the path of meditation, and the path of no more learning. The 5 paths of the Mahayana, which are explained in all of the great Buddhist books like the Gampopa's Jewel Ornament of Liberation and so forth. Khenpo Rinpoche said, in these Sutrayana system, the process of awakening takes many eons. I think in one text it says 3 uncountable eons for the Mahayana. It's a long time. Whereas the teachings of the Vajrayana and the Tantrayana, we bypass the idea of being raw material and instead relate to ourselves as already awakened Buddhas and Bodhisattvas using the special methods of visualization and mantra recitation to see what it must be like to be a Buddha. Remember that Chenrezig meditation? Visualizing our body being made of light and empty inside. His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, when he was teaching at KTD in 2006, he taught Chenrezig, and he said, if you were to tell an ordinary person, meditate on your mind as empty luminosity, he said, the person may not have any idea of what you are talking about. But if the person were to say, meditate on your body as the body of Chenrezig, the Bodhisattva of compassion, made of light and empty inside, he said you could do that. And by visualizing your body as being made of light, that is practicing with mind's luminosity. And seeing the body of Chenrezig as being empty inside, that's practicing with mind's emptiness. And he said, therefore, mantra meditation, he called it symbolic Mahamudra practice. And then he said, and what do you do at the end of your mantra practice? He said, you dissolve everything into utter emptiness and allow your mind to rest in its own nature and bring the entire exercise to a close. So it's the practices of the Vajrayana using these methods. Instead of seeing ourselves as raw material that need purification, we see ourselves and relate to ourselves as having bodies made of light and empty, and our motivation being the bodhisattva motivation of pure love and compassion and so on. And so through this, it is said that in the Vajrayana, awakening can take place in a single lifetime, but at the most 7 lifetimes. Well, I don't know about that, but that's what I've been told by some of my teachers. Khenpo Rinpoche didn't really talk much about the whole idea, single lifetime and 7 lifetimes. He didn't talk too much about that. Instead, he used an analogy. He said, imagine you have dropped a jewel, a precious jewel, in a pile of sand. He said, that's your Buddha nature, hidden under all of your obstacles and obscurations. The sand is your obstacles and obscurations, and the jewel is your Buddha nature. And he said, the Sutrayana approach is to carefully clear away the sand little by little and reveal the jewel. And see, you can see how that would be, because gradually you practice virtue, you abstain from non-virtue, and so forth and so on. You practice these 5 paths of the Mahayana, accumulating virtue and so forth. And so that's analogous to this, comparatively to this Sutrayana approach. However, he said the Tantrayana Approach is merely to plunge your hand into the sand pile to bring out the jewel immediately. But this is a little bit of a problem, because how do you know where to dig? How do you know, right? And this is why teachers are so important in the Vajrayana or the Tantrayana. They know, our teachers know our minds, and they know our dispositions. Remember the dispositions and aptitudes? Yeah, they know our disposition and aptitude, and they can, like a doctor prescribes medicine, they can prescribe to us the practices to do to quickly remove our obstacles and obscurations and realize our Buddha nature. There are lots of names for the Vajrayana. Sometimes it's called Tantrayana, sometimes it's called Mantrayana, sometimes it's called Vajrayana. But whatever it's called, it involves two specific practices, the two specific types of practice. The two paths, they're known as the two paths of the Vajrayana. And let's see if I can, oh yeah, here it is. I moved ahead because I wanted to make a specific point. Let's see, class outline, here we go. The two paths of the Vajrayana, this was spoken of by Trungpa Rinpoche in his teachings. He talked frequently about the two paths. The path of liberation, which are the various nature of mind practices. We could call them nature of mind practices. Mahamudra, Dzogchen, and the Great Middle Way are three main systems. Learning how to meditate on the nature of mind gradually under the guidance of a teacher. But then there's also the path of skillful means, the path of yogic disciplines, such as the 6 yogas of Naropa and so forth, which Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche only taught in the strict confines of the 3-year retreat. And then the mantra practices, which he taught more widely. And so that's a little bit about how the Mantrayana practices are taught. And there's a lot more that we can say about all of these things. But I see that I'm running short on time, and I want to make sure that we have some time for questions. So I'm going to jump ahead and skip a couple of things in the presentation, and just talk a little bit about, you've read about that there may be, because the Dharma, the Vajrayana practice is quick, there's also a little danger. Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche spoke about this in his book, Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism. When he said, if you don't have the bodhicitta motivations, the powerful methods of visualizing yourself as a Buddha or Bodhisattva and so on, he said it can lead to spiritual materialism and the accomplishment of egohood instead of Buddhahood. And Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche said that without bodhicitta motivation, he said, at best, the Vajrayana will do nothing. And that's at best. He said, at worst, you would accomplish, and he didn't mince words, he said, you would accomplish your own disaster. So we were all a little bit scared about that. So he said, you have to be very careful and only learn the Vajrayana from your one teacher, and always stick with what the teacher says and so forth. Khenpo Rinpoche said, he said, where I come from, he said, we have a saying, one teacher, one lineage, one practice. A young man came up to the microphone and said one day, in the question microphone, and said, I took this teaching from this teacher in this tradition, this teaching from this teacher in this tradition, this teaching from, and then I took a few empowerments in like all 4 different systems, and now I don't know what to practice. And Rinpoche said, well, yeah, I can see how that might be confusing for you. He said, maybe you should just pick one teacher, one lineage, one practice. And he said, then you'll be able to focus better. And then he went on to talk about, he said, He was always trying to slow us down when we wanted to rush ahead in practice. He said, you cannot build the second story first in a building. It's impossible, impractical, and dangerous. So he says you have to build the foundation first before you build the second and the third story. So he was talking about the yanas in that way. And then finally, this is something that Bardo Toku Rinpoche said. He said the very best practitioner is one who has the outer behavior of the Hinayana, the inner motivation of the Mahayana, and the most inner conduct of the Vajrayana. Now think about this. The very best practitioner has the outer behavior of a person who's holding precepts or vows, that their behavior is beyond reproach. They have the inner motivation of the Mahayana, the Bodhisattva motivation. And then they have the most inner conduct of the Vajrayana, such as seeing other beings as Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and looking at the nature of mind in all situations. And I think this was very helpful for me because there have been situations where I've encountered people who fell under the sway of teachers who were harmful, and this actually happened somewhere in the United States. It was actually in one of the island nations, and a teacher claimed to be a Vajrayana teacher, but he was hurting people. And they asked Rinpoche asked Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche asked me to go there, and that's when I spoke to Bardo Rinpoche, and I said, "How do I explain why this teacher was not a good teacher?" He said, "Well, you have to explain that he was not the best practitioner because he didn't have the outer behavior of the Hinayana. He didn't have the inner motivation of the Mahayana, and so on." And so that was very helpful for me. I was able to help the people a little bit better. So what does this mean for us? For us as Dharma practitioners, it means that we should look at ourselves and ask what kind of student we are and see where our Dharma path needs strengthening. Do we need to have more an understanding of the Hinayana and what virtue is and what non-virtue is, and to cultivate virtue and to abstain from wrongdoing? Or do we need to have more of the loving and compassionate attitude of the Mahayana and the practice of training the mind through Lojong? Do we need more of that? Or do we need the discipline of the Mahamudra preliminaries, the Nundro, taking refuge and doing purification and making offerings and so forth? And so Khenpo Rinpoche warned us not to run after every teaching that becomes available to us. Because then who's in charge? If your teacher is not telling you to get those teachings, if your teacher is not helping you to sort through practices and so on, then we could maybe run a little bit wild and not arrive at our destination in the way we would like. So you guys were really patient. I often will stop for questions more than once in a presentation, but I was a little scared that I wouldn't get through the whole outline. So I kind of rushed through it a little bit, but I will provide a copy of the outline to the organizers, and they can make it available to you to download. It'll probably be on the class page, maybe not tomorrow, but maybe the day after. So I'm hoping that this gives you a little bit of an idea of the Sutrayana approach and the Mantrayana approach, and how the Sutrayana approach is a good foundation that helps us to practice the Mantrayana practices with more focus and more focus and sincerity. Oh, thank you, Yunten, for putting the creation and completion. Yeah, thank you for putting that on there. So how do we handle questions, Yunten? What's the usual drill here? How do we have people type them in the chat?
That's generally what we've done.
Okay, let's see if there's any questions out there.
I'll add the lamp of, I forget the last part of it. I did
Lamp of Mahamudra.
And that is no longer available. The organization that used to publish it went out of business.
Okay, well, we'll see. We'll see about finding a way to make it available, because it's amazing. It's an amazing teaching. It was really masterful. Rinpoche was just so good. I mean, his I'm trying to think, his strength was being able to answer just about any question. And it's really amazing. Okay. Uh-oh, I put people to sleep. There are no questions. Oh no. Well, here's one. Let's see. Khenpo Rinpoche discussed impermanence and interdependence at the Hinayana level, but he started talking about emptiness at the Mahayana level. Why? What's the difference between impermanence and interdependence versus emptiness? Oh, because I think a lot of people misunderstand emptiness. They think of emptiness as being like the number 0, or nothingness, or worse yet, they think it's nihilism, that nothing exists, therefore nothing matters. And so it is a very difficult concept for many people to understand emptiness. And I think even His Eminence Taisi Rinpoche said that he has a quarrel. He has an argument with the word emptiness. He doesn't like using it at all. He prefers to use the word limitlessness, because he said the mind has no color, it has no shape, it has no beginning, it has no end, and so on. But these are very difficult concepts for people to grasp. And so, but at the Hinayana level, it's very easy. He even said this to me. He said, if people have trouble understanding emptiness, he said, you have to use impermanence and interdependence to explain. Because he said, impermanence means that nothing lasts forever. And they have to understand impermanence first and foremost, that nothing lasts. And therefore, because nothing lasts, you can make the assumption that things do not create themselves. They don't exist of themselves or by themselves, but rather exist only in relation to other things. And that's where interdependence comes in. And he said, it's very easy to understand emptiness through impermanence, because nothing lasts. Everything is made of parts. Things come and go, and so forth and so on. But I think maybe I am missing the point of your question. Can you explain? Maybe I missed your point.
Nitseki, if you'd like, you can ask verbally, because you can unmute.
No? Okay, sorry. There she goes.
That's okay. Sorry, it's just kind of hard to type it all.
I know.
I think you might have answered it. So it's basically impermanence and interdependence is the same thing as emptiness. It's just we're using different terms, maybe in the context of different yanas.
Exactly, because essentially impermanence is the whole thing, really. I mean, because things, things are not what we think they are. We think they're permanent, but they're not. And we think that things should and do last forever. Or if we don't like them, we think we fear that they're going to last forever. You see what I'm saying? So but so that's, I mean, this is where we have to start, because not everybody can grasp the idea that things don't create themselves. So that's the best I can do. We got to get
Thank
the
you. Yeah.
scholars in.
No, that's great. So they're in a way they're kind of all synonyms. I mean, if you really
I'm sorry, say
understand
again.
impermanence, they're all synonyms. Yes, like
I
if you
don't
really
know about that, but
understand.
I think I couldn't say for sure, but I would say they're pretty darn close.
Thank you.
Yeah, because if I were to say they were synonyms, I'd be in trouble, because I can't say it with absolute certainty, but they're sure close. I appreciate you asking about it, though. I'm really glad you asked, because Rinpoche, because people would say to me, I don't get emptiness, and it upsets me that I don't get emptiness. And so I'd say, well, Rinpoche said that we could understand it easiest through interdependence and impermanence. So he always was there to save me when I didn't know stuff. He was always there to help me. Let's see. Tom says, Rinpoche mentioned you only need to do Chenrezi practice. That was most important. I do my best to practice all three yanas while doing Chenrezi. What works best for the absorption phase during meditation after the mantras? Would you recommend absorbing Chenrezi into our form, or simply recognizing it's always in us? Thank you. Oh, yeah. I really, really appreciate you bringing this up, because Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche, and I'm going to rely on you, Yunten. Khenpo Rinpoche taught on Chenrezig 2 times at KTD. Oh, I'm sorry, once at KTD, and that was written down as a transcript. But then he taught it again in the 90s at Hartford KTC, and that became the dual language book on Chenrezig. That the book is in 2 languages. It's in English and it's in Spanish. It's the practice of Chenrezig. And what he told me, Tom, is he told me, when I asked him, I said, now you want me to teach Chenrezig, right? Now, do you want me to teach your KTD commentary? And he said, no, I want you to teach the 15th Karmapa's commentary. He said, because that's the best. The 15th Karmapa wrote a commentary on how to do the visualizations. And he said, that is the best teaching there is. Now, there were 2 English translations of the 15th Karmapa's root text. And because I'm a nerd, I can tell you what they are. I'm a real nerd about this kind of stuff. The Ken MacLeod, who translated The Great Path of Awakening, the one book I can say I've really read. Ken MacLeod translated it, and it was like done on a Xerox machine. I mean, it was self-published. And then Tyler Dewar, the translator for Pomlop Rinpoche, translated it again in a wonderful book that is now out of print, called Trainings in Compassion. So we have the root text, but you can't get them unless you know somebody who has them in digital form. So we have to rely on Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche's commentary, because Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche's commentary includes all of the details. Now, that being said, Tom, you may wonder when am I going to answer your question? I am going to answer your question now. Let me grab my outline on this, because and I will provide this outline to anybody who wants it. The reason I'm going to rely on the outline, Tom, is I don't want to make a mistake here just talking off the cuff. So I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. Let's see here. Oh yeah, here we go. This is based on Ken MacLeod's English language commentary. Now, don't watch, because I'm gonna make you dizzy here. I'm gonna scroll through this. Okay, here we go. All right, Tom, you asked about the post meditation, practice and how to dissolve it. It's pretty, it's pretty difficult, but it goes like this. When we pray to Chenrezig after the mantra, after the prayer, we see that Chenrezi, there's a Chenrezi we visualize above our head, and he shines light on us and he turns us into Chenrezi. We're now made of light. And not only does he change us into Chenrezi, he changes all the beings in the world into Chenrezi. He washes away our veils and obscurations, and suddenly, bing, we're enlightened. It's amazing. And then we all chant Om Mani Padme Hum together. Om Mani Padme Hum. All of us as Chenrezi, we're all chanting Om Mani Padme Hum throughout the world, and it's amazing, right? And we meditate in this way, but when we dissolve the visualization, we do it in one step by step. All the beings in the 6 realms that have now changed into Chenrezi, they dissolve into light and they merge with the Chenrezi above your head. The Chenrezi above your head dissolves into you, and then you yourself dissolve into light, like a rainbow dispersing into space. And then you rest in that emptiness for a short period of time. And then Rinpoche said, when you start thinking again, then your first thought needs to be, I am Chenrezi. So that's not what you wrote there, Tom. So I think that we can have a chat about that, or I can provide you with this information. But you can also read it in Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche's commentary. The method that I gave just now is from the 15th Karmapa's commentary, and it's what Rinpoche said was the best way to do it. So we can chat offline about that. So hopefully that will be helpful. Okay. Okay, he's saying great. Oh, yay. Let's see. So, thank you. The Chenrezi book. Thank you, Yunten. I knew you could. I knew you'd be there, right there with the book reference. So guys, you can look in the chat and click that, and it will take you to that Chenrezi book that gives just phenomenal instruction.
And it's the English language, Spanish language book.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's also in Spanish, so you can read it there. So I see that it is at the bottom of the hour. So technically, let's see if there's anything else here. Okay. Oh, I remember. Yeah, I remember. You took refuge, Viviana. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for saying hey. It's fantastic. Yeah, and see, now it's like your birthday. Yeah, so July 6th. Way to go. I'm not seeing other questions in the chat, so maybe we will stop here so that I won't get in trouble for keeping you too long. So I hope that through these explanations, you'll see how Khenpo Rinpoche provided us with a framework of the 3 yanas to help us learn the methods for removing obstacles and obscurations and bringing our Buddha nature to fruition through the sutric path of the Hinayana and the Mahayana and the tantric path of the Vajrayana. So there's a lot more to say about all of those, but this is as far as we can go tonight. But I hope it will help you stay focused on the practices that are the best for you. For you and for me, I need to do shamatha on a regular daily basis because it helps me to calm my mind. And I need to do tonglen on a daily basis. Even just 3 or 5 minutes of it will help to train us in the bodhisattva attitude. And I try to do a Chenrezig mantra every day as a way of training in the Vajrayana. So hopefully this will be helpful to all of you. Yunten, would you provide us with some dedication prayers? Do you have them?
Sure.
handy?
And while I'm doing that, I've just put in a quick plug for the Chenrezig practice that we do on the full moon on YouTube every month. So if you do not have access to it from anywhere else, you're welcome to join us on YouTube.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Yinten. I do appreciate that. Yeah, it's really just wonderful to have all these available. Okay, so let's gather together all of the goodness that we have accumulated through talking about the Dharma this evening, and let's dedicate it to all sentient beings. I myself am especially concerned about the warfare in the world, and I think a lot of us are concerned about all the warfare and difficulty in the world. And let's pray especially that Chenrezig and Tara and all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas help us in these difficult times. So let's dedicate this merit to the freedom from war and the bringing of goodness to all of our lives. We'll start with the long life prayer for His Holiness Karmapa. O Chao Kun Ning Che Razu Karmapa, Gyao Kun Trin Le Chi Du Karmapa, Jiao Kun Dun So Wang Kurt Karmapa, or general du trin lei shop ten so. Sunam dehi tam che zik pani, tob ne nye petra nam pam jene, ke ga na chi palap trupahi. Si pe so le dro an yu dro sho. Jam pal pa wo ji tar kem pa tang. Kun tu sam po de an de jin te. De da kun ki che su ta lo ching. Ge wa di da tam che rap tu ngom. Sanje kusum ne pe jin lap dang. Chu ni min ju den pe jin lap dang. Gen dun mi che dun pe jin lap ki. Ji tar ngo wa me lam dru par sho. Du ji le jiao jiao wei trin le pa. Karma pa ten ten pe ning po di. Cho tar kun chap cha chin jun mi che. Ta para pel pel wei tarashi sho. Okay, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you, Yunten. Thank you, Lama Sonam. Thanks all of you for bringing your goodness here. And I wish you a very happy Labab Duchen. And I hope that you have a day full of wonder and a day full of the accumulation of merit. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Lama.